So what I'd like to talk to you now is how lawyers and insurance companies evaluate and determine what is a fair value for a case. Now, I can't speak too much about insurance companies other than to tell you that insurance companies, it's a financial evaluation solely. And their obligation to their shareholders is to offer and settle cases for as cheap as possible. They do not care about the injured person, and all they want to do is settle for less. Every insurance company, there's not one insurance company or an insurance company adjuster who goes home and says, "Oh, honey, I have such good news. I overpaid an injured person today." Why do they not do that? Because they'd lose their job. Their job is to underpay. So what is an injury lawyer's job? To get everything a client is entitled to get the full value, if possible, for what the damages were caused. So what are the elements and how do you consider what is full value for any particular injury? Well, first of all, let me explain. In an injury case, there is no chart. There's no special book that we go to that says this particular injury is entitled to X amount of money. That is workers' compensation. And in workers' compensation, there's a whole schedule associated with that. And I fully outline how workers' compensation works in another video blog that I've done. So please look at that. But for purposes of an injury case, for compensation, does not have a schedule related to what you're entitled to. So let me start with the broad strokes. There's two broad elements of what are properly claimed. One is economic loss. The second is non-economic loss. Let me broadly define economic loss. Economic loss, what I like to describe, is things that come out of your pocket as a result of your injuries or did not get into your pocket as a result of the injuries. For example, medical expenses, pharmacy costs, surgical costs, purchasing ambulatory devices, all of those things that have come out of your pocket, whether it's in co-pays or you had to pay directly, that is an economic loss. Frankly, that's quite easy to calculate. We get all of the medical bills and everything that has been paid, and we add it up. An eighth grader can do it. The second component is of economic loss are lost wages. This is the element of what should have gone into your pocket. So lost wages aren't limited to just what the wages are. It's loss of benefits, loss of retirement benefits. Sometimes if you're a union member, there could be union benefits. But everything that should have gone into your pocket, I'll say broadly, that's another economic loss. So there too, that is quite easy to calculate because we just get what the benefit structure was, what the wages were. Now, if somebody is rendered incapable of working going forward, and they are not capable of working any other job, then a vocational expert would be hired to determine that there's no vocation, no retraining, and incapable of working, and a total lost wage evaluation is performed. However, what's more frequent is somebody is incapable of returning to their prior job, but they are capable of working. In that scenario, we have what's called a loss of earnings capacity. If somebody's prior job, they were earning hypothetically $60,000 a year, and they're not capable of working in that field because of some physical disability or actually an emotional disability that stems from the underlying event that caused the injury, but they're capable of working $40,000 at a $40,000 job, and they should work if they're capable. Then what we have is what's called a loss of earnings capacity, $20,000 a year. But if it's restricted and you don't have an experienced lawyer, they may think, well, it's just $20,000. But you have to look at the inflation rates and what the industries were, because some industries, the pay scales go up much higher than other industries. So that $20,000 in year one, that differential may actually be 30, 40, 50, 60,000 in 10, 15 years. So there could be a complicated evaluation associated with that. But there too, it is just an economic evaluation. That's the economic loss. And there's two parts to the economic loss: past lost wages, past medical expenses, and then future lost wages or future medical expenses. Again, all economic loss. Once that is evaluated, there's another component. What about the non-economic loss? Well, the non-economic loss here too, I like to think of it as two separate things: the physical injury that the individual suffered and the catastrophic emotional consequences that flow from the physical injury. What I like to call between the ears and behind the eyes, the emotional consequences that flow from being physically injured in the way that anybody has. And many people say that the emotional damages are as great or even greater than the physical injuries, because we can learn how to adjust with pain and modify our gait and get by, but it's awfully difficult sometimes to get through the emotional consequences that flow, because it goes directly to our self-esteem. And it goes directly to our self-identity. And when we identify ourselves as somebody engaging and doing all different physical activities, while I may not be in pain, but if I can't do the passions in my life of spending time with my family on hikes and doing various physical activities with them, the emotional consequences can be as large, if not larger, than the physical injuries that flow from it. Now, once we know what those physical injuries and the emotional consequences are, and we've evaluated and spoken to the physicians, is it likely that there may be future medical expenses, likely that there'll be future surgeries and future degradation in the body as a result of the injury? There's something called traumatic arthritis. Traumatic arthritis comes from trauma. That means it's arthritis that has come as a result of a traumatic event, something that would not have happened but for the crash. So there are all of these different components, and once we know what all of those are, the very first question is, how did it happen? Is the injured individual responsible in any way for the event? Depending on the state, and I encourage you to look at another video blog that I've done that talks about negligence and responsibility, and it outlines what happens when the injured individual is in fact partially responsible. But assuming that they are not responsible at all, the next question is, frankly, how much insurance is available? If there is not enough insurance to cover the totality of both the economic and non-economic losses, then the pursuit is for the full amount of insurance that's available. And the real decision that has to be made is it likely that we would be able to recover more than the insurance from the individual or the corporation directly? If the answer to that is no, the recommendation is the case should resolve for the total amount of the insurance. When the amount of insurance exceeds the amount of the full amount of the injury, that's when it becomes a nuanced evaluation. It is not a simple evaluation. And I will give you a simple hypothetical. If there's $10 million of insurance and the injuries and the economic and non-economic loss are far less than that, It really depends on the quality of the lawyer that you have that will determine the outcome of that case. Because insurance companies, and I've represented many um, adjusters and upper management of different insurance companies, they've shared this with me. When a claim comes in, the very first thing that they look at is who's the lawyer on the other side. Because if they know the lawyer on the other side is a lawyer that goes to trial and will hold them fully accountable, they set what's called reserves much higher than somebody who's what I call a speed and greed lawyer. Somebody who goes in and looks for a quick settlement, looks to turn things over very quickly. If you select a speed and greed lawyer, you're going to get what you select, not a great settlement. But if you select the right lawyer who has spent a lot of time in the courtroom, and I would encourage you, that's what you want to ask, who has tried cases, who has held insurance companies accountable. And I would also suggest to you, the outcome of those trials isn't nearly as important as the fact that they're prepared to go and have the trial. Because once you do have a trial, nobody knows exactly what the outcome could be, and there could be a bad witness or something come across at trial, and it's not always a direct reflection on the quality of the lawyer, the outcome. However, the fact that they are going to court and they are trying cases, that's what's central. And if that's what's happening and they've developed a reputation as a true litigator, then insurance companies change their review and they offer, and the great settlements go to the lawyers who are prepared to have trials. So it's difficult to give a specific number, but what we always want to do is make sure that it's a number and a settlement that the client is comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, it's the client's case. It's not our case. It's not the lawyer's case. Never think of your case as the lawyer's case. The person who makes that final decision is you, the client. You are the one who decides whether or not you want to accept the risk of going forward or accept the settlement. The lawyer's job is singular, and that job is to make sure you make a fully educated and informed decision. So long as you've made a fully educated and informed decision, the lawyer has actually done their job. They can't tell you, do this, do that. You can ask for recommendations, and surely a good lawyer will make recommendations and support the recommendations that they make. And those recommendations ought to be based on experience and what's likely based on their experience. But at the end of the day, it's you, the client, who makes that final decision. As long as you're empowered with the knowledge and information to make that decision, you'll make the right decision. So when it comes to valuing a particular case, it's pretty simple. First, if your injuries are well in excess of the insurance, it's full amount of insurance, and you have to decide whether or not it's worth pursuing over and above against the individual or the corporation. Secondly, if it is not well in excess of the insurance, if it's close to, then it's really a question of what you're most comfortable with, whether you want to pursue it and go all the way or not. And when I say go all the way, have a trial. And then thirdly, if there is a tremendous amount of insurance and your damages fall far within that, it's really the guidance of an experienced lawyer who should be able to tell you what is a right and fair number.